There can be little doubt the Whim were a mighty people. Their footprints are stamped over the galaxy from end to end. But the true measure of their power can only really be felt in a handful of locations. Colloquially known as the Jewels of the Galaxy, these ruins are among the largest and most well-preserved ever found. These fortresses vary greatly from one to another in material, architecture, and presumed function. We'll begin our journeys in the icy tundras of Daisk, where we'll find the research station of Reshork.
As far as Whim sites go, Reshork is on the smaller side. It's believed to have served almost exclusively as a research center. The Whim had a strong fascination with nature and appear to have studied it deeply. Most of their research centers suggest they were intent on learning as much as they can about the natural forces of the galaxy. Though what for, I can't really say.
A tower, singular in its vigil, stands high on an icy cliff. Hundreds of meters below, however, a laboratory rests under the restless seas.
The peculiarities of Reshork lay in its architecture. It's possible, and for a long time theorized, that the entire structure was once one, and as the ice melted, part of it drifted into the sea. But there's no evident breaking of the foundation. As far as archaeologists can tell, the structures are functioning the way that they were always intended to. The two halves, the tower and the lab, are connected to each other through tunnels bored into the ice itself. So you have this marriage between artificial and natural habitation. Now, regardless of how advanced they were, building an artificial connection between the two would be much easier and more effective than tunneling into the ice. Maybe it has religious significance, maybe it has something to do with their culture. Either way, this simple staircase tells us something about the Whim that we will see across all their sites, that they were not strictly a utilitarian people.
While Daisk is not home to any civilization, it is not without life. Beneath the surface of those waters, deep in the endless black of the oceans, aquatic life stirs. Creatures of all size and shapes swim those waters, unnaturally vicious in their temperament.
Look, you have to understand, those early days of Whim exploration were exciting. These sites represented the unlimited possibilities of the cosmos, and whenever we found one, we wanted to learn as much as we could about it. Sometimes our sense of wonder outpaced our sense of self-preservation.
A sanctioned exploration of the seas surrounding the compound ended in disaster, as the scientists submerged in the waters were attacked by the native wildlife. Their attempt to flee only led the creatures to the lab. Beasts of every size, possessed of rage, set upon the laboratory with an almost singular vision of total annihilation. Cosmic, brutish wildlife rammed the structure, puncturing it and causing the water to pour in. None would drown though, because with the water came the fast, merciless creatures. By the time the water had filled the space, none lived to scream.
A 136 souls died in the dark. Suddenly, the excitement with which we were chasing the Whim died. The research base was quickly closed.
They had to shut it down. And it really was a wake-up call that, hey, this stuff is dangerous.
After 26 years, the Reshork research base was reopened for scientific study, with heavily revised guidelines. From a frozen research center to a jungle citadel, we now venture to Asparia, where our journey takes us deep into the impenetrable Muramanga jungle, and the fortress known as Barasvik Mosfell. This fortress sprawls outward rather than upward, entrenching itself upon the land with a defiance that has lasted centuries. Barasvik Mosfell is High Clegis, meaning Kinahar down. In Clegite mythology, Kinahar was an oasis where one would convene with ancestors once their spirit left their corporeal form. Kinahar down was a colloquialism used to describe any wonder so resplendent it was believed to have been touched by the gods themselves.
The irony, of course, is that Barasvik Mosfell is one of the most desolate places you can think of. It's okay, honestly. It's kind of boring, for being honest. It's an enormous structure, one of the largest Whim sites ever found. Despite that, there's nothing there. We can't say with certainty what the functionality of any of these structures were, but based on architecture, it's theorized that Barasvik Mosfell was a military outpost, a citadel of sorts. Of course, there's no sign of intelligent life anywhere within 1,000 kilometers of the structure, so what they were defending against is beyond me.
Could it be that the enemies the Whim were defending against were closer to home than we might initially think? Rumors have persisted about that site. Enchanting music, echoing faintly from deep within the jungle, have been known to tempt some unsuspecting souls off the charted path. There, exhausted by the humid, heavy air of the Muramanga canopy, they are greeted by the Muramis, a native people of violent predisposition. The Muramis are not likened to any of the known races of the galaxy. Their oil-colored leathery skin and filed teeth give them a feral look. Their society is primitive and possessed of perverse rituals of sex and sacrifice.
Every year, more people go missing at Barasvik Mosfell than all other Whim sites combined. Now, does that mean that there's a secret society of flesh-eating Neanderthals hiding in the jungle? Maybe. Maybe not. But it should be a hell of a coincidence.
Look, speculation can be fun, but there's no place for it in the scientific community. Not only are these stories based in nothing but imagination, but they also perpetuate dangerous stereotypes.
Now, I suspect the Muramis are somehow linked to the Whim. And I've got no reason to suspect that, except for the fact that the base exists in total isolation for the seeming purpose of defense. There's no evidence of intelligent life having existed anywhere else on that planet. So what the hell were they so scared of? And whether it be by offensive advancement or any other reason, people go missing at Barasvik Mosfell. That's just a fact. And you're gonna put all that together and tell me that it's just a coincidence? No, there's something going on there.
Well, I think the most likely scenario is there does exist a primitive civilization of sorts in the Muramanga that has been grossly misrepresented by modern myth. How many times are we gonna keep demonizing that which we don't understand?
Whatever the true nature of the Muramis is, it lies in the future. Yet our journeys take us to the past, to a place of grandeur not previously known, and to a time before nature took its toll. Today, Dibrium is a modest colony world with a thriving population. In 1212 PA, however, it was a hotbed of criminal activity. One day, as marauders were evading capture, they came across a hideout deep in the desert, hidden from civilization.
For decades, Ayanorra was known as a haven for criminals. It was so far removed from the nearest town that local law enforcement was content to just let it be. Over time, though, this had blossomed into a full-on shanty town of lawless country. So the Alio Deli sent in the big guns to sweep them out.
When they got there, it was empty.
Puzzlement at the disappearance of the inhabitants was dwarfed by the awe of the true nature of that structure. The hovel, sitting unassumingly on top of the desert dunes, was only the tip of the iceberg. Buried under the surface was a cathedral of labyrinthine design. Reclaimed by time, here once stood a tower, hundreds of meters tall. Bone-dry canals spoke of fountains that once rushed through the interior. Stained glass windows that once welcomed light of all colors now knew only darkness.
Almost immediately, it was identified as Whim, which completely changed their approach. Where the military was brought in to drive out the criminals, they were now replaced with scientists. Excavation efforts began right away and would continue for over a decade. There was concern about what exactly happened to the hundreds or thousands of people that lived here.
Look, I've read the first-hand reports of people on the recovery team. Let me tell you, if you don't think there's anything scary about walking down a flight of stairs, you give these a read, yeah? The initial crew dispatched to find the inhabitants spent days descending the structure. And Ayanorra tapers outwards, which means as you move down, the walls cave in. No matter how far they went, they just kept going. And eventually they hit the bottom. And through this whole process, they didn't find one person. Instead, they found caves, big, monstrous subterranean tunnels sprawled out in every direction like roots of a tree. Whether you want to call it bravery, stupidity, those people went into those caves. The bodies still haven't been found.
There appeared to be no system to the caves. Tunnels snaked out in every direction, looping in on themselves or dead-ending. Bore marks on the walls told that these tunnels were certainly made. While no bodies were ever discovered in those caves, something of equal interest was.
A second site, and a third one, and a fourth one. Ayanorra is in fact not just a lone cathedral out in the desert, but a vast network of citadels that fingers its way across the whole planet.
After 12 years of excavation efforts, Ayanorra stood complete, resplendent in its beauty. This Whim site was not utilitarian like the others, but more regal, elegant, and purposeful. A total of 7 towers were discovered and excavated. Prevailing theory suggests more of these structures once covered the entire planetary surface, forming a sort of protective layer around the crust. Today, Ayanorra is among the most visited Whim sites in the galaxy. Far from it, though, is the utilitarian fortress left floating in the seas. Lafe Mathyr sails the endless seas of Zarvis 89. Chiefly used as a research station, this behemoth is comprised of a single superstructure, octagonal in its shape and surrounded on all ends by walls well over 100 meters tall.
Lafe Mathyr is incredible. The stronghold itself actually sits below sea level, and the walls surrounding it make the whole structure function like a bowl. They work as dams that generate electricity to the facility. They'll also allow water to flow in and fill the canals encircling the interior of the structure that function as highways to get around.
And it has to be emphasized the scale of this structure. We're talking 2 kilometers across. The engineering here is incredible.
The obsidian black water is contrasted by lily pads floating past the horizon. As the sun sets, these pads glow a deep amethyst. Beneath those waters, though, blind beasts stir.
The wildlife on Zarvis 89 is quite aggressive. Most abundant are the tetranor, small, skinny sea snakes, flat as a razor and just as sharp. These creatures zip around the water, cutting up their prey. Deep sea scans show leviathans in those waters. Huge beasts capable of swallowing an entire Class B starship. And there are a lot of these creatures in those waters. So even though Lafe Mathyr had been known about for 400 years by the time Reshork was discovered, and even though there's never been any sort of large-scale catastrophe at that site, exploration of the seas is strictly prohibited.
While Lafe Mathyr might not have much in the way of a mysterious history, our next stop most certainly does. Nestled in the heart of Osana is the stronghold of Omyethshara. One of the largest Whim sites yet discovered, Omyethshara has puzzled just as much as it has inspired.
One of the more curious things we've noted about the Whim is that all these sites seem to exist in solitude. They don't appear to have lived in civilizations similar to what we know, and all their sites have immense defensive capabilities, whether that be through the structure itself or the terrain. Omyethshara is unique in that there appears to be no defensive capabilities of the site.
I mean, it just sprawls out in every direction, small, thick buildings just keep going. They're connected by bridges and skyways. It's really the closest thing we've discovered that resembles our understanding of the city. But this whole thing is really one structure. And we can carbon date it's made of the same material. It's all connected. So this wasn't urban sprawl. This didn't develop over time the way cities do. This was constructed all at once. This is also one of the oldest known Whim sites. It dates back over 7,000 years.
On the far eastern side, the fortress lays in ruin. A massive crater, 12 kilometers in diameter, envelops the structure. What the nature of this devastation is, no one can say, but it might have something to do with the fog.
The fog at Omyethshara is something our science just can't yet explain. There's electromagnetic disturbances that causes our instruments to malfunction anytime we take them in. It spreads out in every direction and is too thick to see anything through. In fact, the only way to get to the structure itself is through the river that runs for over 800 kilometers and bisects the compound. It's wide, deep, powerful, and filled with rocks, so it's definitely not for the faint of heart. But when faced with the possibility of knowledge, scientists have proven themselves as brave as any soldier.
Initially, scientists tried to navigate this fog as they made their way to Omyethshara. Within minutes, the team grew so disoriented they called for help. A flare was sent out, but the fog reached so high, little was seen but a faint glow through the clouds. Nonetheless, a rescue team was dispatched to retrieve the scientist, equipped with sonar, radar, and infrared tools meant to help navigate the fog. A small team of 5 highly trained professionals entered the fog on 3/31/1183 PA. None of the scientists or soldiers were heard from again. Until on 1/92/1185, almost 2 years later, researchers at the Omyethshara Research Station were alerted to a perimeter breach on the northeastern side of the facility. Tasserick Niles, one of the soldiers from the rescue team, stumbled out of the fog and approached the facility. His clothes were ripped and tattered, and his feet bled from the rough forest floor. When questioned, Tasserick said that all scientists and soldiers were alive in the fog. Moreover, he said hundreds were in the fog. The thickness of the clouds meant he could never see what they looked like, but he said there were cities in that murk. Sprawling cathedrals from a people so ancient the Whim thought them long extinct. Tasserick said he was sent to usher more into the mist, so they may bear witness to these wonders. The researchers, wary of his obvious delusions, instead confined Tasserick to the medical ward, seemingly forgetting he was a highly trained soldier. Tasserick escaped the compound, killing 6 in the process and wounding 3 more. He made no attempt to tamper with the facility in any way, nor steal anything. He made a beeline for the fog and was never heard from again. Tasserick was the last soul to emerge from that cloudy hell.
No, I do not believe there's a secret civilization living in an impenetrable fog. It was almost 400 years ago. I'm sure the stories of Tasserick now have been greatly exaggerated by history, as is often the case. What's more likely is he survived due to his unique training, and he drank some contaminated water or ate a bad berry or something and went feral. It's unfortunate that he had to take so many lives with him, but I don't believe there's any more to the story than that.
Sounds awfully similar to the Burmese, right? Secret civilization, living in some ecological anomaly outside of a Whim ruin, preying on those who dare trespass. Yeah, there's something there. I haven't pieced it together yet, but it's brewing.
While all Whim sites are possessed of their mysteries, our next stop is unique even among these holy sites. Because unlike all the others, Onren Uyran is not located on a planet at all. While the smallest of all known Whim sites, Onren Uyran is by no means quaint. A Herculean space station, 30% larger than any other, This station hangs confidently in the orbit of Ho, a small moon tethered to the planet Loturn.
Onren Uyran is one of the oldest Whim sites. It was discovered by settlers fleeing Syndicate space during the early days of the Raging Territories expansion. Serving as a contrast to Ayanorra, the station was seen as a beacon of hope, proof about life among the cosmos.
I mean, it's not that romantic. The station spent centuries being passed from one hand to the next. Gangsters, outlaws, authorities, and everyone in between would take control of the station and eventually lose it. And each exchange in ownership was rotten blood.
Eventually, as the warring cooled and the Raging Territories calmed, Onren Uyran became a symbol of the Yeklori. Yeklor has often been at a disadvantage in the Milky Way. The smallest and poorest of the sovereign states, Yeklor has often proved to be the butt of the joke, and so too did they draw the short straw when it came to Whim ruins. Onren Uyran pales in comparison to the splendor of Eliodel's Ayanorra and the might of Osana's Omyethshara. The Yeklori are a proud people, however, and they believe Onren Uyran is the most significant of the Whim ruins known to us. The long, cavernous halls swim in the darkness from outside, dimly lit from the distant star. Sounds of footsteps, creaks, and hums echo along the walls. Venture deep into the station, and you'll have to rely on the glow of the buttons on the equipment to light your path. While open to tourists, Onren Uyran has proven of little interest to those seeking adventure. The station is boring, gloomy, and uninviting. Scientists similarly don't find much interest in the station. The other Whim strongholds reveal secrets about their species. They tell us of their culture, their history, their way of life. Onren Uyran does none of this. We know it's a Whim ruin because dating on the structure places it at over 5,000 years old. But whatever material was of interest here, it appears the Whim took it with them when they left.
You know, the truth is the station is more significant in what it suggests than what it yields. We assume they were studying the red giant 13C. To what end, we can't say though.
The site is not without its mysteries though. In 1411 PA, Zen's Skavrock, a Yeklori scientist stationed on Onren Uyran, claimed to hear voices whispering to him. As his time on the station continued, Skavrock began to unravel. He stopped sleeping and would frequently miss his scheduled appointments. A psychiatrist screened him and decided he needed to be rescinded from the project. Skavrock did not want to leave. He was reported to have run through the halls, screaming, "We're not done yet." He disappeared into the darkness of the station. It took 12 hours for a search team to find him. When they did, they found Skavrock dead, his neck cut clean through down to the bone. The words, "They know," were poorly written on the wall in his blood.
I mean, even as ghost stories go, that one's kind of boring, right?
The nature of the Whim invites speculation, and the superstition that surrounds their ruins is part of the draw. Many want to experience the haunting realization of the distant past. Our final stop on this journey, though, is possessed of a recent history more chilling than any primordial legend. Not far from Onren Uyran is the utopian site of Chorierzen, the most well-preserved of all Whim ruins.
Chorierzen was discovered around the same time as Onren Uyran, back during those founding days of the Raging Territories.
Well, it's a beautiful structure. The building is comprised of 5 massive open-air terraces that step down the side of the Lorelea Mountains and offer views of the valley below. And a dense forest that covers the entire surface, it's very rustic and really no surprise that it's the most popular tourist destination in the galaxy.
There was a time, however, when no one dared set foot in the fortress. In 1318 PA, a young Astal woman named Havorta Bani kidnapped the Aran family while they were on a tour. She held them in the site for 2 days while authorities tried to negotiate their safe return. The details of their fate is best left to history. Suffice it to say, though, by the end, death was a welcome release from the torment she inflicted. She hung all 4 corpses off the edge of the structure. The image of the Uyran family hanging next to the Shilrar's Falls is among the most infamous in galactic history.
What happened to that family was an atrocity.
There are reports about what happened to them. I lost sleep when I read them.
Havorta then surrendered herself to the authorities, claiming voices whispered to her, saying a sacrifice was needed. Her trial was the most public since Jikar Dohat just 10 years prior. During the trials, autopsies of the victims portrayed a torment that can only be surmised as ravenous.
Havorta Bani was not a well individual. This was a premeditated act of evil with extraordinarily cruel intent. She visited Chorierzen 20 times that year, clearly plotting out routes, gathering supplies, making a plan. She was sick, and nobody did anything until it was too late.
Havorta maintained she was not in a lucid state of mind during these 2 days. Nonetheless, she was sentenced to death for her crimes. She would be killed just 10 days after arriving in prison. The vicious murders quelled tourism for several years, but the march of time ensured it once again picked up. A shrine to the Uyran family was commissioned shortly after the site was reopened, and the anniversary of their deaths is still recognized to this day, as the structure is closed to all visitors, and 4 massive signal lights are cast on the structure from the city below. The numerous mysteries of the Whim have proven a life's pursuit for many, with their legends and lore seeping into every aspect of modern culture. From artistic movements to societal structures, even the ghosts of the Whim have guided us through our development. The many sites and ruins left behind have confounded and inspired for centuries. Travelers from across the cosmos have flocked to these sites to get a glimpse into the past. Yet sitting there, just beyond the Zulara Veil, are the Whim. What answers can they provide? What secrets can they unlock? The cruel irony of being so close is that we are still so far away, for travel to Whim space has been illegal for nigh on 1,000 years. Over the centuries, some up-jump frontiersmen would venture off into the territory seeking fame and fortune, never to be seen or heard from again. Except for one. Join us next time as we unravel the incredible story of the only ship to have returned from Whim space.
This was a legitimate operation.
What secrets, mysteries, and legends they uncovered. What truths can be revealed.
You know what the truth is?
And are we ready for the answers?
I struggle to believe.
Find out next time on the final episode of The Whim, A Kingdom of Ruin.